but it means that I have to get converted to a WMV file, upload it to YouTube, and then pop in the link. So it's a bit of a process. I can't just quickly do it, right? So I'm doing that as I work my way through. So okay, so with Eunice Lipton looking into Degas, right, at the ballet, the first question we might ask ourselves, which is a fairly easy one to answer, is what group of works are the focus of this essay? Right. Degas' images of ballerinas are the focus. She has some ones that are not by Degas, but they're used as evidence to sort of begin to talk about Degas' images of the ballet. And it's not just ballerinas, right? They're the focus of it, really, but they're images of the ballet. So that's the focus of the article. Now, what question is she raising about those pictures? What does she want to know? What is she investigating about the pictures of Degas' ballerinas, about pictures of ballerinas? Yeah, that sounds horrible. You came to the Doctor of Art History, and I got your medicine. Degas. Be well. That's okay. So, what basic questions is she asking about them? Why are they so popular? That's part of it, certainly. But she wants to know something really about the pictures themselves, right? Not really why ballerinas are so popular. Yeah, why is she interested in them, right? Okay, that's part of it, is why is Degas interested in the ballet as a theme? And the logical question that comes right out of that is, what does he think about it? Right? What does he think about, what should we understand are the ideas that he's trying to communicate about the ballet and about the ballerinas. So how do you answer a question like that? You read the pictures closely, but you also look into the social situation of ballerinas at Degas' time, right? Because he wasn't so nice as to sit down and say, this is why I'm doing pictures of ballerinas. Right? Then the question's answered. But that's not what he did. He didn't say that. So we have to go back and say, what was the world of the ballet like in late 19th century France? And what is the visual evidence in Degas' picture, and how does that correlate with the world of the ballerina? The world of the ballet. Okay. So, what was life at the ballet like? What do we know now that we didn't know before about the world of the ballet in 19th century France? Doesn't have to be big pictures, details, anything. What do we know about the ballet that we didn't know before? Where they come from, where the ballerinas come from. Okay, so we know something more about the social situation of the ballerinas do. And what did we find out? Do you remember? Theater parents and military parents, right? Now this is different from what you often read at the time, that if you actually do a statistical analysis of where ballerinas came from before they ended up at the ballet, we find out that they came from families of two different backgrounds, by the majority. Not everyone, but by majority. Theater parents, military parents. And this runs counter to the myth at the time. So we learn, in addition to learning sort of the real situation, we also learn what the perception people had was in the 19th century about the ballerina. The perception was quite different from that. The myth, the constructed reality, around the ballerina was that they came from single parents, born out of wedlock, right? And that they were extraordinarily poor. That's the myth that was propagated about the ballerina. And Lipton spends a good amount of time sort of diving into that. That this was the perception. There's no doubting that people said this about the ballerina. But the question she asked, and what Jude brought up, is that she begins to question whether or not that's true. Right? You can find all sorts of quotes that say it, but are they right? In an election season, isn't this kind of more obvious than normal? Right? People say things, and saying it doesn't make it true. Right? So her question is, after she reads that people are saying, hey, the ballerinas are ugly, the ballerinas are sexually available, right? They're flirtatious, they are poor, they come from broken or amoral families. But she begins to find out, and actually researching the social situation, that very little of that is actually true. Right? The sexual promiscuity, the ugliness, the family heritage is simply not true. Okay? Now, we have basically two ways of looking at ballerina singing in the 19th century. One is the perception, or I should say the misperception, the misrepresentation of the ballerina, the demeaning one, or an alternative, a more balanced view. Which of these two does the God take? Sometimes, yeah. But there's a point, I think it's 91. Yeah. Turn to page 91, right? And it's the part that whoever had this book before I got my hands on it marked it up. Let this be a warning to you. Don't mark up school property. If you own the book, it's more power to you. But see what these people did to us, right? The part that's highlighted or dark lighted at the bottom of 91. What is so interesting and important about his works is that they are deeply ambiguous. They both do and do not adhere to the prevailing prejudices. They both support and subvert the commonly held stereotypes. Right? So, Jude, either answer was right. Yeah? You said he's more with the realistic than the myth. But there are some pictures it's very hard to argue they aren't part of that myth. Right? Part of the kind of art that sexualizes them and focuses on them as being these ugly women of amoral social situations. Right? You can see it both ways. Now, why, if the reality was that ballerinas weren't overtly sexual, if ballerinas weren't incredibly impoverished, if ballerinas weren't from broken homes, why did those myths take off? Why did those myths develop? This is a question she does in fact answer. Sorry, Sid? It relates to, obviously, the opera is, if we think about the opera per se, right, there are two ways we can think about the opera. One is that the opera is a performance, and ballet is linked to that. Most ballet was in service of opera, whereas now ballet is performance unto itself, right? But we can also think of the opera as a way of defining this building, right? Tony Garnier's building of the opera, and a way of sort of thinking about the world, right? The world of performance. The opera, right? The opera world. So, the idea that they were sexualized comes from the opera, you're right. But it comes from the opera in a couple of different ways. One is that these are women whose job is to be on display. Their job is at public exhibition. And we've read before, and we'll read again, that women on public display in 19th century France were what? Bad, right? Women on public display in 19th century France, right, were the demi-mondes. Remember, we talked about this before with the Nachman reading. They are, if you're on display as a woman and you're out there by yourself, you are on display for what? For men to own you with their gaze. For men to exert their power over you, to be had, right? To be possessed. So if these are women who are on stage, often unaccompanied, that prejudice instills the way in which people think about them. They are sexually available. That is what being on public display, being exhibited publicly as a woman in 19th century France equaled in the minds of many people. Okay? So that accounts for part of it. And again, the opera accounts for the other part of it as well, because they're artistes, right? And artists are poor. This is a stereotype, right? There are these stereotypes about women, and there are these stereotypes about artists that instill, right, inform these misperceptions about the ballerina that were so popular that they clouded the reality, right? So they had to have come from poor families. They had to have come from single-parent families. There's no proof for this because that's what artists did. We have those stereotypes today, don't we? Maybe not about artists, but about certain groups of people. The welfare mother. Bullshit, you hear. Swearing on tape. Right? But, you know, we make these same stereotypes, we propagate them when they're good for us. Especially we want to keep people in a place. You know? And then Lipton goes on to mention that a lot of this comes from the fact that really the world of the ballerina was a world of power manipulation. Because many of the ballerina's careers were supported by the people who held season tickets. Right? And there's two different ways in which Lipton refers to these people, by two different terms used for them. One of them is in French. The abonnés, which simply means the subscription holders. Right? That's those guys in the black hat. Right? Yep, in both of these. They, by holding subscriptions, by supporting the opera, had access to the private spaces of the opera. They had access behind the scenes. And so many of the God's scenes are not of performance. Right? So in other words, they're not showing them exhibits for public display. He shows them behind the scenes, this privileged view that the abonnés had. Right? The ones that had the best seats in the house, subsect of this, were called the jockey club. Abonet looking on, right? They're supporters. And you can see the degree to which there's this idea of presence there, right? Looking at them, watching them, because they support them. And once you support them, that's the feeling of that same sense of ownership, right? Now, it's not ownership sexually per se, although that's the individual very easily, right? But it is this idea of a conflict of unequal statuses within the ballet, right? Okay. Now, there are, if you look at Degas' pictures, what we're going to find is that some of them seem to take the point of view of the Abonet, the one who owns. Others of them, she suggests, starting on page 102, others of them, she suggests, subvert the myth. You turn it upside down. Right? So, it's a question we have to keep thinking as we look at his pictures is, what's he doing here? Is he supporting the myth? Is he subverting the myth? Right? And the ways in which he subverts the myth, right, is to sort of think about the ways in which dance is honorable as a profession, rather than somewhat slippery. Right? It's work. It's hard work. That's one way. Hard work is honorable. And there has been in art, right, leading up to this idea, and you're doing that in the sorrow picture. So I'm funny. This idea that, images of hard workers were showing the sort of the moral strength and character of France, right? And Lipton even mentions that the dance was one place where people were talking about the rebuilding of France and its cultural status, right? So, hard work, right? And Degas is dance often as the pictures maybe have the best examples of that, but dance is hard work, right? Dance is a community where you work together for a common cause. This is moral, isn't it? Right? You can't do it on your own, at least not within this particular context. Right? He shows mirrors all the time, but he doesn't show dancers looking at themselves in the mirror. They ignore the mirrors. They're not vain. The mirrors show the outside world. The mirrors show the connection between this closed environment and the world at large. Okay. And then when it comes to this idea of the power inequality between our Abonets and the ballerinas, she suggests toward the end of the argument that basically the teachers, when he shows them, are awkward. The Abonnets, when he shows them, are anonymous and often marginalized, pushed off to the side. So look at the picture on the right. There's our Abonnet, and he's dark in his gaze. I mean, the God looking down the dress, showing the cleavage, and so is that guy, right? But look where he's put him. Cuts him off with the frame. He pushes them off to the side. So there's this paradox in his works. On the one hand, they reassert many of those myths that surround the ballerina. Sexualized, poor, controlled by men. On the other hand, sometimes subverting that. And maybe both at once. Which makes interpreting these pictures and looking at them that much more interesting. That much more fun. Right? So let's look at some of these pictures. We've got a wealth of them in the DC area. And I've got some good slides of some of them as well. So, as you can see with these Degas ballet pictures, that we are as often as not behind the scenes, right? And that's something Lipton makes a huge point of, is the degree to which we are behind the scenes in Degas, that we have a privileged view that he is making the private public, right? He had that view. He had that world. He was in that Abonnet, right? He had the wealth. We talked about this on Tuesday. He came from an incredibly wealthy family. That's what gives him that privilege, to be there and have seen these scenes. Now, there's a good chance that he's doing sketches on site, but he's certainly not set his easel up back there, right? Again, the Impressionist mythology. But we end up seeing the backdrops from behind them, right? These are out there, and somebody's in front of the stage, and we see, on the other side of the curtain, and the one on the left, the legs that you see are the legs that are on stage. We're backstage. We're part of the supporters of this, the owners of those legs. I was amazed in reading this, the degree to which so many times over it overlapped with what Nachman was saying. Fragmentation of female body parts as a way of perhaps adding to that sexualized reading. Remember when Nachman talked about the one leg that you saw up above, right? It was all about the fact that the leg was a synecdoche, right? Swanky word, right? A symbol for the female body as men view it. Right? Well, look at the God. There's a dozen of them there. Right? So on one hand, we can take that meaning and go that way with it. On the other hand, we can say, but what does he do? Look at how he's marginalized the two Abonnets on the left with their canes, where they're totally sort of hidden and cut off even more than the women are. Right? The women are only part of this. There's somebody back there practicing, but those you guys, they're even less of it. Right? So it's complicated, isn't it? There isn't an easy reading out of this. There isn't one answer, one size fits all. That's the great thing about the humanities, right? We can sit around and disagree. Both answers don't have, one answer does not have to cancel out the other one. Right? You can be ambivalent, you can be ambiguous. But again, this is a bit hot in the coloration. I've got to fix that. And it's not often out, this monster picture from the end of Degas' career. Actually, this is another 15 years or so. But again, these are places where men are usually not allowed. And I find that really fascinating about Degas' pictures in general, is that he gives us these views that you were not supposed to have. And sometimes they're views at the racetrack when the jockeys are trying to control their horses before the races actually start. We're right down there with them. We saw this at the end of class on Tuesday. But sometimes, and especially in pictures of women, we are in these feminine spaces with him. And I think this is in a particular way, for me as a male viewer, is a stronger reaction than it might be for the women in class, because this is a place where there's only one man that belongs there. That's the dance master. Or maybe as an Abonnet who feels he owns them. Right? But there's that sense of ownership. And in addition to that, you'll notice in a lot of the pictures, here we're starting to see the bit. So here beginning again. The point of view is down. Usually higher than the figures he represents. Now, on the right, it's about eye level with the girls on the stage. But here, he's above their shoulder level. Right? He chose a point of view that looks down on them. Now, I'm not saying that he got on a box and stood on it and actually looked down on them, but what he has done is made these pictures from an elevated point of view, which we remember from Pissarro can actually, in itself, affect the way we interpret pictures. Right? This one was in the reading, and over in the Phillips collection, again a rehearsal where there are no men other than the dance instructor. And we have that wonderful view of the dance instructor being all ungainly, right? He's trying to show her the move, and she's elegant and has it, right? And she's moving nicely through his space. And he looks like he's just kind of flailing around, right? I love how the other girl, on her points, is looking in from behind that column, right? Watching this almost as if she's afraid of the dance master, like he's on a tirade, and she's gonna, maybe he won't see me over here. A nice detail of that as well. Right, so he's trying to show her how to do this, and obviously he is much less coordinated, much more awkward than she is. The God's compositions often have this sort of tipped down ground plane that you're seeing here. Notice how it comes down towards you. So the closer you get to the bottom, the closer you get to the front edge of the picture, it's as if the plane sort of just does that. And she mentions that if it were in the actual ballet, that's what the stage did, so you could see the stuff that's on it. But here it's an artifice that he uses that allows him to look back into the space. And these are lessons he's been learning from looking at Asian art that has made its way into Paris. That plus the interesting blocking of things. Notice in the Degas pictures, and keep this in mind as you look at other ones, that again and again he blocks things awkwardly, interestingly. So you just see part of something. Look at the column off to the right, and the dancers that are behind it, one with their foot up on the bar. Right? Look at what you see and then what you don't see in a Degas picture. The girl on the left, leaning against the column, and how he's often using the edges of things to fragment the figures, which really makes all of the compositions, I think, incredibly fascinating, incredibly interesting. Let's see what's coming up next. There's that blocked view of the four ballerinas in the back. And behind the scenes, you get a hanging leg, don't you? You don't see the body, you don't see the leg that's planted on the ground, you don't even really see the shadow of any of that. It's just a leg, right, with part of the taffeta dress. Is that taffeta? Whatever you would call it, lace dress. There. Right. Chiffon, thank you. That is exactly the word I should be using. Right? And then this idea that Lipton mentions that this is hard work. There's a dancer probably at rest, looking at the stairs that lead up from the street, taking a moment out. Many of the figures end up really shagged out, right? Really beat up by this, because it was not easy work. And a lot of his pictures show them in between performances. Well, they almost all show them in between performances. But at the moment when they've sort of reached the end of their rope, right? They're just exhausted by this. And that's a way of aggrandizing what he's showing. A way of showing it to be more honorable than the status quo as suggested. This picture had recently come to the National Gallery from the Corcoran collection as part of a big buyout. And again, it's one of these privileged views where we have ballerinas often looking somewhat awkward. Sometimes the anatomy is quite off. The woman in red, for example. You try to make those knees fit up with your hips. It's just sort of how the thighs articulate is really quite difficult. But again, not a man to be found anywhere here. There's the woman that's leading the group. All we see is her head back here. Right behind her, there's a second head there. That's all we see of the leader of this dance troupe. But again, notice the numerous places where bodies are cut off awkwardly, especially on that staircase. Look at the flurry of legs behind the staircase, the feet down below, which is really, if the knees are here, then the head ought to be about there. We ought to see it, but we don't, right? And then the legs coming down the spiral staircase. And again, what a privileged view, right? Some of them, the shoes are there to be put on. And we get a girl leaning over her behind toward us as she laces up her slippers, right? One could argue, just looking at that one detail alone, that this is Degas the misogynist, that this is Degas taking the point of view of these women as being objectified and sexually available. She's bending over with her ass pointing at you, as she's caught in a vulnerable position as she laces up her sandals. And that seems to be part of the motif he's really putting across, because on the right-hand border, there's a woman lacing up her sandals as well. Right? So you can see them unlaced on her foot, and more of these unlaced sandals there on the bench. Two pairs of sandals, two girls coming down the stairs. Are those feet going into those sandals? Right? He's implying a little narrative here. The woman that's leaning toward us, right? We see one leaning away from us, the other one leans toward us, her bodice drops down. It's a view that men should not be looking at. Right? It's a time to look away if you're a gentleman. But the God doesn't. The God focuses on it. So again, that's that ambiguity. Right? Hard work, but at the same time, there is this dynamic going on in the 19th century that suggests that these images are often, or at least these women, were often sexualized by male viewers. Again, just a nice detail that came out of this. Degas is a fantastic painter as well. I mean, these guys all are pretty darn good, right? But his ability to capture sort of motion as he paints through these little wisps of paint, the white edge hem of that chiffon dress, without the rest of it, right? You see what I'm talking about? Just right in here, right, that bit right there. He suggests the dress. But then also the ribbon itself is handled with, as you get close enough to it, it just becomes sort of paint on the canvas in a very abstract placement, right? The yellow sash behind her, a single stroke in the light, right? What makes Degas an impressionist is, I think, in many ways, his pictures are every bit about momentary experiences, as are Monet's. And they're very bit as much about light pervading through these interiors. Sometimes it's artificial light, right? He doesn't paint as often in the outdoors for horse pictures, sure, right? But these girls standing on their points, they can do it for a long time. Certainly do it longer than I could, right? But it's a moment. It's a transitory moment, which is what brings them in line with the Impressionists as a group. And, of course, obviously, the broken brushwork that we see everywhere. A detail of the feet on the left-hand side. You'll notice all of the different light is not really consistent here either. See how those legs behind the stairs are lit? Almost as if from an artificial source of light, right? Look at the part of the legs that are just back here, these ones here, right? Those legs back there are lit from our side of the canvas. They're lit from the right and from in front of them, whereas the light source is coming from a totally different direction. Again, there's these little inconsistencies, right, that show the degree to which Degas is constructing these scenes. They're not something he just sat down and looked at and was done with. He has a series of pictures that have very awkward formats, at least awkward in the 19th century. And by awkward, I mean not often seen. So quite wide, very short images. These aren't very big either. They're only about like yay, right? But again, these privileged views. And I think with this one, we can see all the things we've been talking about. On one level, look at the point of view he's got. He's looking down on almost everyone. At the same time, it's a very privileged and private view. A girl is sat down on that chair, and in order to sit on the chair, she had to kick up her dress over the back of the chair. So what did Degas get to see just before she sat down? Right, the top part of her tights. Yeah. I mean, you're not gonna, it's tight, so you're not gonna say, but still, it's leering in its way, suggestive. Still, he shows this as incredibly hard work. The woman in red, right, sitting on a bass cello, finding a place to go when there's nowhere else. There's one chair in the room and somebody's done it already, and she just has to sit. So she gets the bass cello, hikes it into the corner, and she is just beat, isn't she? Right? Leaning down. At the same time, there's something quite sad about it, too. It's almost as if it's revealed emotions that she's been trying to hide. Remember we saw that picture of melancholy on Tuesday, where he turned a figure study into just a study of a mood? I think these have that as well. That these are doing more than just showing the ballerinas at work, that often he's picking up moods and trying to illustrate them. Again, more work in the back right corner here. The sense of community that Lipton writes about is always part of these pictures. Okay. The colors are just fantastic. These aqua greens that come in and play up against those pinks, right? Which you might not notice at first, and certainly from a distance you don't really isolate them out. But they're really an important part of how he constructs the sense of that chiffon, right? The sense of the light playing through it. Notice all the places where skin tone is no longer skin tone. Look on the arm of the girl that I've cut off in my detail slide. And where that green that we're seeing that's coming off of that wall, right? It's the green coming off of that expansive wall that we see. It's highlighting her arm here, right? It's the reflected light off of that wall, and he understands that very, very well. Then I have three nice details of her, where we can see they're seated on that bass cello. Parts where he's come back and smeared some of the brushwork, right? Blended it, perhaps even with his hand, but also using the nap of the canvas to emulate the way in which that chiffon looks, such as there. But also with this is understanding of reflected light. Right? Look at the way in which her red robe is picked up on her arm, how the green of the wall is picked up on her hand and on her cheek. Right? He's really spent a lot of time looking at how light plays. And so this is one of those things that really brings him into step with the Impressionists. And again, I told you I've got these slides just as I can. Right? We can look at them better than we can look at them downtown. Now, these compositions that Degas is coming up with, which are really quite bold, right? Notice how the space plunges back and how nothing is really centered, and how the voids between the figural groups play a role in the dynamic of the picture, right? And how he's taken that background and he's tucked it into, the upper right corner, the tic-tac-toe board of our rule of thirds, right? And how that corner is taken up with something very active, very busy, but pushed away from, and how many of the other parts of that rule of thirds are left empty. Upper left corner, lower right corner, bottom center, top center. These areas are empty. Right? It's a really dynamic composition, one that's governed by that diagonal and by this really bold sort of reconfiguring of the different compositional parts. A lot of this is coming out of Asian prints, particularly Japanese woodblocks, that from around the 1850s onward had begun to make their way into Paris. They could be hatched from nothing. Sometimes they were being used as fish wrappers off the boats that were shipping into the ports. And many of our impressionists and post-impressionists were picking these things up and going, that is a new way to think about composition. Because from the Asian works, they realized that classic one-point perspective wasn't necessary to make a dynamic composition. Now, Degas knows classic one-point perspective. There's no doubt about it. But he's subverting it. He's heightening it. He's tipping the floor down in a way that's similar to the Japanese print. He's using broad planes without any kind of articulation. For him, it's the green wall or the brown wainscoting. For Harunobu, it's the outdoors. The flat of the floor could read just like a wall if you didn't have that little screen back there sitting on its foot. Degas is enamored with these and bringing those compositional ideas into his works. Another of these dances, usually the National will hang side by side. And you can see how the composition is really quite similar, just in reverse. Right? We've stuck the background dancers in the same part of the composition, but on the left rather than on the right. Some of the dynamic stretching, she's pulling up her tights, right? Again, behind the scenes. Do I have to reiterate all the things we know about Degas now and how they play into this picture? Right? You take those ideas and apply them here quite well. In this detail, it's nice that you can see the stretcher march. In the 19th century, they stretched canvases different than we do. They sometimes did not go over the edge. So you get that sort of trapezing between the nails that you can see there in the different figures. But again, ballet is hard work, right? Is a theme that he works with again. But it's that privileged view that sometimes gives you views of things you shouldn't be looking at, like a girl pulling up her tights. Right? These are things that suggest that maybe one should look the other way. There's often kind of an awkwardness to these figures, too. She's reaching down for something on the ground. Where did she drop? Something for her hair. But again, you'll notice that there's that play between the sort of realistic, everyday ugliness of hard work with a quasi-sexualizing of it. Because again, as she bends forward, he emphasizes the cleavage. And we saw some photos and some works by Degas where you've got the nip slip, right? In this case, it teases that without actually showing it. And again, the parts where the paint all of a sudden breaks out and just looks like something, an abstract painting from the 1950s. You know, where his command of it and his interest in resolving the paint goes not very far at all. Right? He's really interested in it as paint. I wanted to wrap up this with a brief look at some of his pictures of another group of women, where he gives us the exact same idea. Ideal or privileged views of a woman's world where male dominance is a strong undercurrent. And that's the world of prostitution, which is a theme for many of the Impressionists, because it's work. It's hard work. And just as Degas never shows us, or rarely shows us ballerinas actually performing, but rather getting ready to perform, practicing to perform, he shows us prostitutes getting ready for work. Shows them bathing in the old French way with a pitcher and a tub, right? No shower spigot or anything like that. But you'll notice that, again, he catches them in awkward positions that can be read as highly sexualized. Her legs are wide apart. Again, her rump is bared toward us. Knowing that he's doing these at the same time he's doing the ballerina pictures makes you think about them in parallel. Do the ideas in one translate into the other? This is a monster picture. It's about 4 foot square, maybe 5 foot square. It looks almost like a small pastel, but it's not. Right? Up at the Krieger, another prostitute combing her hair, just simply getting ready for work. Note Degas' point of view, looming over the top of her, right? Looking dead down on her as she prepares herself. He does these throughout his entire career. At the same time he's doing it's not like he does the ballerinas for a while and stops. Right? They run consistently through his career. It's not like he does images of prostitutes at the back for a while and then stops consistently through his career. And they show a theme of this interest in professionals, right, work, but not actually working. And that's exactly what we saw on Tuesday when we looked at the race pictures. Images of professional workers, images of athletes who work hard, who are prepared for something, right? They're trained for something, but they're not actually doing it. I think he likes that, right? The body that's been honed for a particular skill and shown doing something entirely different. The Phillips is one of the very earliest of these, one of his earliest ones. It's from 1875 or so, and it sort of sets the stage for the rest of these. And again, it's this idea of the unguarded moment, right? The privileged view. These girls are not doing this with the idea that the God is nearby, right? He's imagining himself there. He's placing himself into their environment. And in giving us these images, they're on one hand kind of innocent, but on the other hand is eroticized. Just Japanese prints, to get an idea, right? That's where some of these compositions are coming from. And I wanted to show one last Japanese print. And that's this one, which I've never seen anything bring this into the conversation. I think it's absolutely fascinating because here's the women's bathhouse that we have a view of, that Kiyonaga has a view of. But you'll notice that he includes a male viewer there, looking in through a peephole in the back on the left. Isn't that the God? Like in this picture, in so many of them, he's the guy that's peeking into the woman's bathhouse and touching them at a moment that he doesn't know he's there. And I don't know of any proof that he knows this picture. But we do know he loves Japanese prints. He adores these things. And I think that he's been looking at these images of courtesans. There's a long tradition of images of prostitutes in Japanese prints, of images of nudity, titillating pictures like this one. Degas making his new French versions of these. Right. Okay, I had other Degas to show you. We may look at them briefly in a week. But that's it for this. I think we've covered everything that's on the slide list now. So what we're planning to do for the majority of class on next Friday, right? Because we don't meet on Tuesday. What we'll do then is to begin to review for the exam. So what you ought to do as participants in that is bring your printouts of the different readings. So that if we decide we want to talk about something in that reading, we don't have to do it in the abstract, right? If you don't tell on your computer, that's fine, but just make sure that they're ready to be flipped back and forth. Okay? And if you're doing like me, old school, then, bring a portfolio of stuff with you. Okay? Have a good break, and I will see you next